What's up, everyone? I'm Liz Hunt.
And I'm Chelsea Poppens.
And you are listening to the Agency Rocket Show, where we talk about the chaos of running a creative agency.
Woo!
Yeah!
And for those of you that have been following along, we're still in our branding series. We just recently covered social media for small business and how to implement your brand into your social media. Covered a little bit more technical stuff. And now, today, drumroll, we are going to talk about what is it time to rebrand your business.
Yes! Woo! The ever elusive question of how do I know when I'm supposed to rebrand? Because truthfully, I think it's different for a lot of people. I think it's a question that
for people, do I need a rebrand?
I need a rebrand?
I need to update my wardrobe and change my personality, dye my hair.
I'm in my rebranding era. Yes. I go through a rebrand every 5 to 10 years. I don't know.
Some might call that a midlife crisis. I think I'm ready for one.
Yes. Every decade I have a midlife crisis.
So whether it's a personal rebrand or a business rebrand.
Actually, it's probably like once a quarter I have a midlife crisis. It's probably more accurate.
I think it's also just people who like change and don't want to like be stagnant. I'm like, I need something to change. Yeah. Shall I just cut all my hair off?
Yeah. Yes. That is you and I to a T. We get bored so easily that we're like, okay, what's next? What are we going to do? We got to change. We got to do something. We got to move. We got to grow. The goalpost is always moving for us. I think it's part of being an achiever, the Gallup Strengths achievers. Like we always got to be moving into our next achievement. So that's fun.
We're very stable mentally.
Oh my God, so stable.
We don't need therapy.
Yeah. Okay. So rebranding a business. We're not really going to talk about rebranding as humans because that is a whole other side that would probably end up with like lots of tears and fetal positions if we started.
After hours. Listen to Chelsea after hours. A little cocktail on hand.
It's too early in the morning to talk about rebranding us as humans because that'll end up with too many tears and lying in the fetal position. So let's talk about rebranding companies because that's what we're here to talk about today. Good stuff. Okay, so first let's talk about there's a couple different types of rebranding because sometimes clients will come to us and they will say, well, we need a rebrand, but we don't really need a rebrand. We just want to tweak some things or we just want to
we want a facelift.
Yes.
Want a little Botox.
Yes. Yes. Back to the midlife crisis.
We want to perk things out.
Yes. So I think maybe that's where we should start is like, maybe there's like a spectrum of rebrands, like way over here, number 10, completely redo everything, rethink everything. It's like a complete makeover. You are a new company, new personality, new messaging, new everything, right? All the way to, I just want to update the font on my logo, or maybe we want to build in some new colors or we want
to expand our brand past just having a logo.
Yes. All the way to maybe something in the middle where we keep a couple of things about the logo mark the same, but then we update maybe some of the typeface, we update some of the colors, we kind of build out the brand identity a little bit and maybe update some messaging, just kind of give it like a little bit of a facelift just to make it look fresh and modern. So there's kind of this spectrum of what we would consider rebranding. And so I think that's something that we should take into consideration in this conversation. What are your thoughts, Chelsea?
I think that's perfect. I mean, it really does look different for every business as they grow. Small businesses a lot of times don't have the full branding tools, whether it's like that logo mark, color palette, all mapped out, messaging, like additional elements and graphics. And as they grow and as they want to have more guidelines and they have more employees and more like cooks in the kitchen, they want to make sure they're managing their brand correctly. And the brand feels, looks, and the experience is more cohesive, especially like you look at franchises, they have everything like the same, like you go to a Starbucks, it's going to look like the next Starbucks, but how do they maintain that control and consistency throughout? And they didn't always start as a franchise. They started off as a small coffee shop in Seattle and they expanded from then. So like the spectrum of rebranding, like you said, is definitely going to look like a visual facelift or a complete overhaul, depending on where you're at with your business. So that's great that you were able to define that for people because not everybody knows.
Yeah. Okay. So starting with that, knowing that there's like kind of this wide spectrum of options, which is helpful, I think, for us to kind of like define whenever we're talking about rebranding, because it's creative and we all love creative. And basically when things are creative, that means that there's no limitations to whatever options that we want to have. But I do think it helps for us to have guide rails for things. And so that's what we want to kind of do here is like build in some guide rails. So there's a spectrum for what we have for a rebrand. So everything from doing absolutely nothing to a complete overhaul and then everything in between. Let's talk about how you know that you are a business that you should probably think about updating your company visual identity or brand. We'll call it the brand because it could be anything and everything. So whenever we are talking about like one example of, hey, it's time to rebrand your company, what's the first thing that we would say, Chels?
So I think one of the first things is like when your brand no longer reflects you as a business. I think that's really important because businesses are ever evolving beyond the original purpose, the original mission, like the goals obviously change as you expand and you bring more people on your team. And like, I think a great example of it is Airbnb. Like they used to be, they're like simple, cozy, like a cozy place to stay. And then they expanded into being like a more globalized company where it's like, we're everywhere. We're not just like making you feel comfortable in your small local area. Like we're actually across the globe. And so like, as they expand outside of that like small niche and ecosystem that they are originally supporting, like they have to change their brand, their messaging, their marketing, like the audience changes, like things like that. So like, I think when your brand no longer reflects where you originally started, that's a good place to be like, should I rebrand?
Yeah. I think this happens a lot with startups. Like anytime that I've worked with a startup, they will start out being like, okay, we're going to solve this problem and it's going to be for these specific people. And we're going to build the company to be going in this direction. And then at some point within the first couple months, 12 months, maybe 2 years, they realize, oh, nope, that is not actually at all what the problem is or that we're going to solve or the people that we're here to help or whatever it is. And they take a total diversion and go do something else or they build something else or, you know, whatever it is. And so this is a perfect example of that, I think, is like, okay, so we need a name change. We need a logo change. We need a messaging change. It's like, okay, we're now doing something else.
Yeah.
So that's a good time to like, okay, maybe we should think about a rebrand because we are no longer doing what we thought we were doing.
I think another good example is Uber. They were just a transportation company and then they expanded into Uber Eats. And now they deliver groceries. It's not something that they were originally doing, but they just kind of like segmented their Uber business outside of just being a taxi service.
Yes, that is such a good example, specifically in that way, because what we would do in that instance, if we were helping them, we would say, okay, now we need a brand that is versatile enough to allow for all these subsidiary brands. to fall underneath, right? So we have kind of this primary brand, and then we have the eats version, and then we have the transportation version, and then we have this version, and we need a primary umbrella brand, yes, that can house and still look visually good, but also just be kind of this parent company that is able to house all of these sub companies, also these sub brands too. And so that is a great time to know, okay, now we need a rebrand, because now we have all these other sub brands that go underneath it. So that's a great time to rebrand. Yep.
I think they did it well too, because I mean, their whole core at the foundation of their business is to make it easy and simple to find people to take you places, and to find like easy for you to order from restaurants to get things back. It was like simplifying everybody's life. And so they did a good job of translating it, not just from Uber transportation, but to Uber. We'll get there fast. We're reliable. We'll have our drivers. Like a lot of that was very well transitioned over.
For sure. Okay, what's next, Chelsea? What is our next, like, hey, it's time to rebrand when?
So another good one is when to start asking yourself that question is when your audience has changed. So like if your original clientele has changed from the beginning, or I mean, there's times where things change and like the different market trends that are going to impact your business. And maybe you notice, I don't know, I'm trying to find out an example, like maybe less young people are coming in and you're getting more older people, and you need to figure out what that looks like. One example I know is like that Old Spice. It used to be known for like old people. And now, and then they rebranded and they did a bunch of like campaign marketing ads around like young, vibey, work with it. And then like they have weird commercials, like riding a horse and doing all these things. And they were trying to translate their brand to that younger audience. So that's not just like encompassing old people.
For sure. That's an interesting idea. I'm trying to think of good examples of your audience changing. But it's almost like I've seen it more often that it's like your audience ages out. Your audience is the below 20s demographic. Actually, maybe it's more of like below 30s demographic.
Or you want to stay with your people, like as they go throughout their years, maybe.
Stay with me here. So like 30 and under is your demographic. So 30 and under used to be the millennial generation, right? And then it became Gen Z, right? And then at some point it's going to be Gen Alpha. And so it's like the millennials liked a certain style. They expected a certain messaging and they expected a certain type of brand. Yes. And then came along Gen Zs, right? And they expected something different. They wanted something different. And so I think maybe perhaps it's like your audience has stayed the same, but your audience has changed, right? It's like your business is still for 30 and under, but the people that are 30 and under have changed what they are looking for and what they are after. And so I think that's something for considering. For example, your company is like, hey, all of the young people used to be on Instagram. Well, now everyone 30 and under is on TikTok. So now we have to rebrand, rethink, redo our marketing strategy, rethink all of our visuals, rethink how we distribute all of our marketing channels and all this stuff. And now it's on TikTok and it has to be less highly produced. It can't feel like commercials. It can't, like all these different things. And that is a rebrand, right? Because it's a different audience. You still are targeting the youth, but it's a totally different demo. And so I think like that's like where we have to think about this is probably a time for a rebrand. Or if nothing else, a new strategy. Right?
Yeah, that is interesting, especially when you bring in the social media platforms and the different audiences. This kind of goes with outgrowing the brand that we just talked about, but Nike used to be strictly running. And
Yes.
so their audience was runners. But as they expanded
Yes.
into basketball or
Yep.
those other sports, and not to say they were like kind of watering down their brand, but they had to expand to those audiences for the how are we going to reach kids with basketball, like that are in basketball grassroots programs. And they brought in all of these professional athletes to represent their brand. Michael Jordan, one of the big ones, Caitlin Clark, also another big name.
Yeah.
But like, as that audience shifts or grows with you, like you really do have to change that messaging, because like Nike, the swoop, very well known for like, what is it? Harry's isn't it like Nike's like the Greek god of the fast one, the messenger or whatever. Their whole brand was built around running shoes in the beginning.
Yes.
And so.
So maybe this is a good example of not a complete overhaul necessarily, but maybe when your audience changes, maybe this is when you have some like tweaks or updates. You update your messaging. A lot of what we're talking about is like market segmentation or building out your target markets, and not necessarily like complete target audience changes, right?
Their messaging changed from that to be like, anybody can be in fitness. Anybody can be an athlete. Anybody can do whatever. Not just like, if you're a runner, you're wearing Nike.
Yeah.
You're like, just do it. It was more the messaging, the taglines, and everything was more all encompassing.
Yes, exactly. They had to build their primary brand into something that was more all encompassing, but then they still had to build out these specific markets for runners, but for basketball players, for yoga people, and sports ball things. Sports ball things. I know. Oh my gosh, you can see me struggling. But you know what I mean? That's when it's like, okay, not the complete overhaul, but more of the smaller updates and refreshes. And it's probably like messaging updates and stuff like that. Yeah. Maybe building in more color palettes and to allow for a bigger scale. I think that's maybe an important note for this one specifically.
Yeah. I think that messaging ties us into like the next one, which is...
And this one is actually a big time pet peeve of mine, and I can't wait to jump on my soapbox about it. But when your visuals are outdated, if your messaging is outdated, that is one thing. If things in your brand feel outdated, here's what I will say. You probably had the wrong, not always, but originally, but possibly, you had the wrong designer helping you for that brand.
Political answers.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be like...
They botched it from the get-go.
No, well, okay, here's the thing. There could have been many, many different things that happened as part of this. But if your brand feels very outdated, that should not have happened, is what I'm trying to say. Because when you build brands, and I'm talking specifically like the whole primary thing, if it feels outdated visually, then you did something wrong when you built it originally. And it's only because when we build brands, it's really important that we don't follow trends. It's actually super important that we build them in such a way that they are meant to stand the test of time. And I know that that is like a very idealistic hope. And it's not always reality. Okay. So I understand that that's not always the case, and that's not always reality, and we can't always do that. And not everybody follows that same policy that we do here at DayCloud. But that is the hope, that we build brands that are capable of standing the test of time because they are so on point to who you are as a business, as a company, that they are not just following trends so that in 5 years that they just look outdated. I would say like really try to not do that. If you are a designer, really try to not build brands that will look outdated. And if you are a business, really try to stay away from design trends of the day, because you will have to rebrand every 5 years. And that's expensive and it's not fun unless you are like Chelsea and I, who just like to change things just to change things all the time. So I get that. But we have never once changed the DayCloud logo. We've changed things all around the logo. We've changed our color palettes. We've changed our fonts. We've changed our website. But the logo, the actual logo itself, we've never changed it. And that's been very, very purposeful. And it's because it's meant to stay the same. It's meant to stand the test of time. And so that I would just encourage you to consider that. Now, soapbox aside, I would say, obviously, if your logo is looking outdated, if it looks like something from Microsoft Paint, from 20 years ago, oh God, that might be like 40, 30 years ago.
Probably longer.
The 90s.
Floppy disk era.
Oh God, I always forget how old we are. So if it looks like something from 30 years ago, then it's great. Change it. You should definitely consider rebranding.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the things I saw it on social media. That's how I get my lingo and my trends. But I think they call it like millennial clean, where everything's just very like simplified and clean cut and like
gray.
Looks nice. I'm also thinking about like we had the whole topic around bubblies, how clean the can looks, or like maybe it's ahas that are very.
What's a bubbly?
Is a bubbly that has a very clean look, and then there's a bunch of other like hygiene brands, him and hers, and things like that are very just clean. And someone was saying that that's a trend that's out of style now, and how they're trying to come up with like more bold and poppy brands that really stand out now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think some brands can hold on to the clean look, especially if they're like leaning into climate friendly products or things like that. Like that's the whole point. But that was the one thing that came to mind where they're like, that's a trend that's on the out. But it's also kind of like young people being like, that's not cool anymore.
Well, here's the thing. When it comes to retail brands, it makes sense to be on trend. Not necessarily for your visual identity, but for like campaigns, your packaging, your, all these things. Yes, it makes sense to be on trend. Like, of course, you should stay up to date with the visuals and how you look and your marketing and your promos and all that stuff. That, of course, stay up to date. But when it comes to your branding, like your actual visual identities, that I think you should try as much as possible to stay true as closely as you can. And this is actually an example that you mentioned earlier, Chels, prior to jumping on here, but the Tropicana, the stuff that happened with Tropicana, they had their original branding and their packaging that they had for their boxes in the stores for their orange juice. And they rebranded and redesigned their little cartons, and people hated it.
Epic fail.
It was a massive fail. People couldn't find the orange juice, so they lost, I believe it was like millions of dollars that their sales dropped. They were like following a trend.
They had a 20% drop in sales when they changed it up.
That is insane. So anybody who says that design doesn't matter, I point you to that, sir. Design doesn't matter, except for when it actually really does. 20%, millions of dollars worth of sales lost. So, sure, design doesn't matter. You're right. Anyway.
One of the reasons that failed horribly is because they didn't understand how people find products in grocery stores. Like, no one really truly loves being in grocery stores. Nobody's like going through, I used to, but like, I always know that I look for a specific thing when I'm in aisle. So I'm not like overspending. And I'm like, what am I looking for? I'm like, that orange with a straw or the F is it? And if I can't find it, I'm like,
a specific visual.
Easiest thing for my brain at the end of a long work day to process. Orange straw. Man.
They wildly underestimated their brand, the brand equity, the packaging, everything about that is proof of how, one, a rebrand gone horribly wrong, how following a trend is such a bad idea.
Yeah.
Like for your brand. And just how incredibly important brand equity is.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had so much brand equity with their customer base. They wildly underestimated the brand equity that they carried with their customers.
Yeah. They lost 30 million in 2 months.
Well,
before reverting back to the old design.
Yeah. I mean, that is such proof.
Like, undo.
Yes. Please tell me how much design does not matter in our world. Please, I give you the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, actually, I don't give you the floor because that is...
It's our floor. It's 100%. Our podcast.
Yeah. It's $30 million. Please. Yeah. So anyway, yes, when your visuals and messaging feel outdated, yes, you should consider updating.
Mm-hmm.
But I say move forward with fear and trepidation.
Live in fear consistently. Yes. Don't ever let it leave you.
Yes. I just say do it right the first time. Like hire us to do it right for you for the first time, and then you won't have to. But if you must, really take into consideration the
impact.
Like what you were doing. Yes. The impact and the equity that your current customers already have with your brand. So
yeah,
there you go.
Obviously, it's different for the size of the business too, because those larger companies should be doing beta testing and having different testing groups of like their perception of those things. If they're doing it right and doing a little more market research. Yeah. The next one would be if you're struggling to differentiate from your competitors. Yes. I think is a very key one. I think one that comes to mind, which is like if you're looking for contractors or like home remodeling companies, like all of them have like a house in their logo. All of them are like their letters built in a house or some form, and their names are never creative. It's
always just the last name or
yeah. And you're like, well, they all look the same and they all pretty much have crappy websites or things like
terrible websites. Yes.
Handyman or a dime a dozen.
Yes. All their emails like bounce back or like don't work. Their forms on the website don't work.
Yeah.
Or they don't respond, you know, for like a week.
Plumbing services.
That's why, like with contractors specifically, that's why if you find a good one, you're like,
if they have a good website, you're like, wow.
Yes. It's like you've been drowning and then you just got a breath of oxygen finally. And so it's like, I will never leave you. I will pledge my undying love for you. I will send all of my friends to you. Like it is amazing if you find a good contractor. So
yeah. Do any come to mind to you for tough industries?
I was going to give you a recommendation for a plumber if you ever.
Oh, in Omaha, you're not going to help me. You ain't nobody's help in Des Moines.
I know. I'm just saying. I just have a good plumber.
Ryan claims he can fix a lot of things.
I'm sure he does.
With time, lots and lots of time. He might not do it tomorrow, but in the next couple months, it'll get around after.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I just remembered that I need to call the plumber to fix my faucet.
Yes, because Andrew won't
remind me. No, he is man enough to know that he is not capable of this. So I appreciate it. Appreciate that he's willing to spend the dollars on on a professional.
Yep. When in doubt.
Okay, what were we talking about?
What's another example of somebody having a hard time differentiating themselves from their competitors?
One thing that I have run into, I think just like from running our business, I feel like we run into a lot, and maybe this is the Midwest, maybe it's like people being people, but we have run into quite a bit of like people don't love change, and they're actually like not big risk takers. And so whenever we are rebranding a business, we always give people the mild, medium, and spicy options. And it's actually pretty rare for someone to choose the spicy option. it's almost always the mild or the medium that they will pick. And I know everybody likes to think that they are like the spicy ones, but
I'm fun.
yes. But actually, more often than not, people are afraid to be the ones to stand out.
Yeah.
They really are. And it's just like this herd mentality. It's this like afraid of being different. It's this fear of taking risks. And so I think it's like they want to be different, but they don't want to be like too different. And so I think that we run into that more often than not, that they're like, well, we're different from our competitors because we have a better product. Or actually, I feel like that's what everybody says.
They're like, relationships.
Our products are better.
We care about our customers. I'm like, I think I hear that from every business. Like, we take care of our people.
Everybody thinks that their products are better or that they care about their customers more.
Or when you ask the question, the question, like, what words define your business? They're like, integrity.
Integrity, professionalism, service, and
quality.
I'm like, yes, quality. Oh my gosh. So the thing is, literally everybody thinks that. Every company thinks that about themselves. I think what's more valuable for people is to think about, like, why do you think you're actually different?
Why do you think you're special?
Yes. But like, what can you say about yourselves that your competitors couldn't say about themselves? Because your competitors would literally say all the exact same things. They would say that they have integrity. They would say that they have the best product. They would say that they have the best customer service. They would say that they're the most professional and that they're trustworthy and that they're authentic and that they're honest and like all this crap. And I'm like, come on, can't we do better?
I find it funny when it comes to like color palettes and people choose color palettes that are very similar to the competitors. And, and you're like, don't you want to stand out apart from them and not be like exactly the same?
Yeah.
And things like that. And we're like, we deliberately didn't choose this because of your competitor has this. And sometimes they just forget that. Like they bring it up maybe one time and then they forget about it. And they're like, why aren't we doing this? And you're like, because of this.
Yeah. I do think it's really interesting, just the conversations. And it's really interesting based on the industry that we're in.
No, I was like, our modus. I loved our modus.
Yes. They were willing to try and be risky and push the envelope. And
I loved their brand.
Yeah, they were. And they were ones that, because of the industry that they're in, you wouldn't think that they would be willing to do some of the spicier things, but they totally were. Visually, they were more willing to like push the envelope with some of the aesthetics.
They had some brighter colors that really made it pop. And it looked so good on their trucks with the bright colors and that we chose and the logo and everything. Like, I think they stood out in like a really great way. I think we nailed it.
Yeah.
We did a great job.
We're so great.
Yeah.
But it helps that it's like the perfect partnership because the client was willing to let us take them there. You know what I mean? So I think in some ways, this concept of like, if you want to differentiate from your competitors, yes, you could do a rebrand, but you have to be willing, right? Like you have to be willing to stand apart and you have to be willing to consider yourself a differentiator type of person and business, right? You have to be okay with like standing out. And I think that oftentimes we don't see that, but I'm hoping that more and more people will understand that. And this, I do 100% believe that this is true, that products are pretty much the same. But what is going to take you the extra mile really is going to be the brand that you carry and that underlying reputation and all that stuff that the brand carries with it, that brand equity, that brand consistency, and all that stuff is really what gets you the customers and all that.
Past that finish line.
Yes. Being able to stand apart.
I think Nike's another example of that. People will continue to buy Nike, but I think their shoes are garbage. Don't repeat my... I think their shoes
it's recorded, Chelsea!
I think their shoes have gone downhill so
really?
bad. Yeah. I think especially the running side, since they're fighting for their portion of the market between the Hoka and all Asics and all these other running brands that have arisen.
What's Hoka?
Of course you wouldn't know it.
I don't... Do I look like I run? Oh my God. I don't run. Hoka?
Oh my God. That made my day. It's a running shoe brand.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
But yeah, Nike's running shoes are not great.
Why do you run? That's so dumb. I hate running.
Why do we work out? Ugh.
I also hate working out, but I just lift weights.
You do a ballerina weightlifting.
I 100%
your words, not
do.
mine,
And
not me.
Ballerina workouts, yes, I do. And I'm very proud of them. And I'm very okay with it. I don't need to be, strong. I just need to look fine.
Yeah.
That's all.
You look great.
Oh, I hate running. Ugh. I ran track growing up and I hated it so much.
Me too.
There were times, I should not confess this, but there were times that I would fake falling and getting hurt. Like I would stop it. Stop. I would seriously do that, like fake fall and get hurt so I could get out of it. Like I'm not even kidding.
I thought you were competitive.
I hate running. I hate it so much. I played all the other sports. I played like volleyball and softball and all the other things, but I hated running.
What percentage of the season were you hurt?
Oh, I would just do it for that day. Just for that, just to get out of running that day. So that I didn't have to finish the whatever miles or something, that we had to run. One time, oh God, why am I confessing this? I can't say it. I should do. I'll say it.
You can tell me off camera.
We were in an actual track meet, and I was running, and I was winning, and then I started to lose, and so I got so mad, so that I tripped myself, so that I would fall.
Yeah. So you had an excuse to lose.
Yes, and then I got back up and I finished, and then.
And people are like, oh my God, you're so good for still finishing the race.
That's exactly what happened. And now I feel terrible. I know.
You're so
I feel
courageous.
So bad.
You're so
I literally had this the high school coach. I was in junior high when this happened. I literally had the high school track coach come up to me and he put his arm around my shoulder and he was like, I just want you to know that the fact that you finished that race was more important. He had this, I know, God, my stomach is, oh God. Yes. He gave me this whole pep talk about it.
I hope you still feel guilty.
I do. I feel terrible. I'm sweating right now. I feel so bad. I know.
I've
Chelsea,
lost all respect for you.
You should. I have no respect for myself. Why? What? I never did it after that because I think I felt so terrible.
Yeah. It's funny because I do see athletes, not to that extent.
Hey, I was in 7th or 8th grade, okay?
Yeah.
And I was a chubby kid. I drank Kool-Aid all the time.
I was a roly-poly.
Yes, I was. I was an ugly girl, so
you see kids actually do that quite a bit. Where they're just like, I'm just tired, so I'm going to fall down all the time on the court.
I think I did it 2 times. I only ever did. That was once.
You blacked out a couple more times, though. I'm sure it's there.
No. No, it was only the 2 times. God, I'm such a beautiful person.
You were kind.
I never did
important.
I never did it after that, I promise. And the thing is I did the triple jump. I think that's why I hated it so much, because I never actually ran. I mean, I did do some races, but my real actual thing that I was good at was the triple jump.
Well, thank you for that confessional. Welcome to...
I know! This is confession.
The Lord forgives you.
I think I probably do need...
Shame.
Don't say that! Chelsea! Don't say that. Oh my gosh, that's so mean.
Thank you for your honesty. This is a safe space.
It's not a safe space. Never a safe space with you around. Oh my God.
We'll get back on track.
Back to the task at hand.
All right. Finally, when should you consider a rebrand? When your brand reputation has taken a hit. And so, I don't know, trying to come up with some examples. Like sometimes people rebrand as a tool for crisis management or reputation rebuilding, where the one that comes to mind right now, they haven't rebranded, and I don't recommend the rebranding, but Tesla right now is taking a huge hit as far as poor brand and their sales that have plummeted. And
I mean, I feel like they should just shut it down and get sold and not have
different ownership.
Yeah. A less controversial one maybe was like when Pepsi did their terrible rebrand with the weird half smiley face thing. Like, it's not like
But did they rebrand because their brand reputation was already at stake, or did they?
Well, it was more of like they rebranded and they just did such a crappy job of the rebrand that they just needed to rebrand again. Does that make sense? So it was like it was like their company's reputation was maybe not taking a hit. It was more the brand itself was really crappy. And so they needed a rebrand for that.
The one that comes to mind is Monsanto. They got exposed for like, there were just some wrongdoings within the company. And some of their products were causing like health conditions across the board. And so then they ended up rebranding because they pretty much got canceled. There's no cancellation at that time, but they had to do a drastic rebranding in order to get their reputation back and get the trust of their customers and farmers back in general.
I mean, that's a great example of you have screwed up royally, and it's probably a good idea for a name change. Possibly. That is a good idea for like a big time overhaul. That's when you're like, we got to change literally everything.
Yeah.
So that's a good one.
I'm like, I had to Google it quick because I needed more information, but they found that a name change alone couldn't erase the past.
Ooh. That must have been real bad.
Yeah. So they had a role in producing genetically modified organisms like and pesticides like Roundup, which leads to cancer. They found out. Yeah. They had a history with Agent Orange, which was a lot of those pilots that were spraying chemicals in the air that a study showed that those chemicals were also used in like Vietnam War and had lasting environmental and health effects. So so there's aggressive legal action against farmers over like the seed patents and corporate greed at Monsanto. And so, they had to do a lot of different changes and they had tried to name change. I don't think they ever fully recovered because they used to be huge in our area and with like my dad as a farmer and
huge.
Not anymore.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yep. They're like the Monsanto name disappeared. Controversies didn't.
Well, interesting. That's when like a whole bunch of people get fired too.
Yep.
Not just a rebrand, renaming. That's like when you fire your entire executive team and the board and
wipe out.
Woo! Good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Well, I just want to like quickly touch on some of the challenges and pitfalls people do just to summarize them, but common mistakes people can make when rebranding. Not communicating it internally, a poor rollout of your messaging, your logo, your brand, especially at the corporate level is like, you have to have a whole campaign built out around it, easing their employees into it. Also, rebranding at the wrong time. Rebranding won't fix poor service like the Monsanto thing. It won't fix poor quality. It won't fix a bad reputation amongst your audience and your consumers. Another example of that is Uber, when there was that bad reputation for them treating their employees and taking a chunk of their money and not paying them enough. Them trying to do some branding changes to cover that up did not fix their stock or their equity or people buying into Uber.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another one that goes into it is a lack of internal buy-in or employee alignment. Like if you're not communicating, if the employees aren't behind or don't necessarily agree with that logo change or the messaging or the realignment of values, it's not going to work. You're going to fail.
Yeah. Yeah. The rollout and stuff is going to go bad. So part of the rollout needs to be you get internal buy-in first and then you communicate it externally. So it's internal buy-in and then external buy-in. That's what Chelsea's talking about, is like making sure that there is some sort of launch strategy. You start internal and then go external. We've had clients who have had zero launch strategy before, and they had customers that were calling them saying, who is this? Why am I getting emails from this person that looks like you guys, but it's not, or it's a different name, or, whatever. So just make sure that if you do a rebrand, that you have some sort of communication with your customers, because they don't know what's going on unless you tell them.
Yep. And then kind of like you spoke about already with Tropicana, losing brand recognition through drastic changes can lead to a pitfall in that rebranding campaign. Coca-Cola is another one. They rebranded to new Coca-Cola and they changed their formula and they lost a lot of money, just like the Tropicana rebranding. And they ended up shifting back to that old formula and Coke can. So new Coca-Cola was not a hit with their audience and their people.
Yeah.
And
they're a good example of they've kept their primary brand and then just done like the sub brands, the Coke Zero, the Diet Coke. And that's a great way to do it, to invite in new markets of people, but keeping all the same Coca-Cola primary umbrella brand. It's a great way to do it.
Yeah. But I'm like, I think there's a couple others, but I think for the most part, we kind of broke things down pretty accurately of like how to know when to rebrand, what the different phases of a rebrand can look like for you and your business, no matter what growth level you're at. And we've kind of given you some real life examples of that hopefully you know about and you can kind of put your finger on. I'd be like, well, that's what happened. That's why that didn't succeed or fail. So hopefully it was a fun and engaging episode. More episodes to come, obviously. But if you like this podcast, please like, share, follow, leave us comments. We have some people emailing us their feedback and we love to see it. We love to hear all the good and bad things too. So
nicely critiqued things. It's great. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.